Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is John, and this is Readings with John. And I'm about to do a reading for the collective, some very interesting cards on the table. But first, I just want to say thank you so much to Santaro for shouting me out. That is literally a dream come true. I feel like I just won American Idol or Canadian Idol, honestly. So enjoy your vacation, very well deserved. And shout out, thank you to Lisa M. Harrison for exposing Sam to my work in the first place. So again, hold the vision, y'all. Things happen. But let's jump into the collective. So, really interesting. So, first, I'll just show you guys how I read the collectives before, if you're new here. I have three decks that I've blended together. So, I've taken the Marseille deck, which is about 400 years old, the Rider Waite, which is like 100 and something, and then the Vox Arcana, which is relatively new. So, it gives me an idea of like old school, new school kind of energy. And then I've separated all of the major arcana into one pile. So that's going to show me the archetype that we're dealing with. I'll pull one of those cards. I have all of the court cards in another pile. So that's going to show us the role that we're supposed to play in all of that. So I pull one of those. And then the rest of the minor arcana are in a third pile. And I pull three of those plus the bottom of the deck. And that shows me like a sequence of events and the energy and blah, blah, blah. So what's interesting is that when I went to pull my major arcana, I had two cards hit the floor. So I'm like, okay, I'll take both of them. And it was the Hierophant with the Death card behind it. And what's really interesting, so the Hierophant has come up in at least two or three of the collectives I've done online already, a ton of the private personals, and like all of my readings for myself leading up to the eclipse were all about the Hierophant. Like if I would do a Celtic cross, Hierophant would be dead smack in the middle. And what this was talking to me about was like, so in terms of my pre-eclipse readings that I was doing, it was giving me the impression that we were about to step into the role of Hierophant. And what that means to me is that the Hierophant is very much so kind of like the teacher, the guru of the tarot deck, but more so than anything, it's like the Hierophant is technically the bridge between realms, right? So this little cross that he's holding is actually supposed to represent like Jacob's ladder, which is the ladder from heaven to earth or whatever you'd want to call it. But the other title for the Hierophant is Pontifex, and Pontifex in Latin means bridge builder or the great bridge builder or something like that. So the Hierophant effectively is the bridge between, you know, what's happening outside of the construct and inside of the construct, if you want to use that language. And he's effectively the translator, right? You could say the medium, the channeler, whatever, but it's like the Hierophant's superpower or his gift is very much so in the voice and the use of language, which has been the big theme that's been coming up in all of these different readings. It's all about language and the voice and yada yada. And what I mean by that is if you think of like the traditional role that any kind of priest plays in any religion, right? That it's like their words consecrate things. So they marry people with their words. They turn bread and wine into sacraments with their words. They conduct last rites with the words, et cetera, et cetera. You get what I'm saying? It's all the power of the voice. The voice is what consecrates things or makes it official or yada yada, because they're the officiant, right? So they officiate things. And one of the things that they officiate is the new emperor, right? So one way that I read the tarot is that the Hierophant ranks above the emperor. Because if you think like just classic history, use like the Holy Roman Empire, for example, the Pope crowned the emperor. The Pope made the rules. The emperor just enforces them, right? And we've learned from history that it's like the emperor was always allowed to do whatever he wanted to do as long as he did what the Pope told him to do. And as soon as somebody disobeyed, the next thing you know, they were a heretic or whatever, right? So smash that like if you've been called a heretic because you did not listen to the Hierophant. But that being said, what's interesting about the death card, right? So it's almost like it's sneaking up on the old guard here, right? So the old guard, they're still flying a little close to the sun. They don't think the wings are going to melt yet, but it's like knocking on the door. You know what I'm saying? And excuse me. What's interesting about the death card in general is that the Rider Waite depiction has the emperor in the foreground here, right? So the emperor is the one that's been, you know, rest in peace to the emperor. And then these other two children that are depicted here are technically his heirs, right? So when one king passes away, the next prince or princess becomes the new monarch, right? So it's about the energy of succession and the unstoppable cycles of nature and life and death and rebirth and blah, blah, blah. But the Hierophant is almost depicted as being immune to this cycle, right? That it's like, you think like Game of Thrones, right? The wheel keeps turning, the crown lands on a new head every couple of years, but the Pope is like outside of that dance, almost as if they're in the hub of the wheel or something, and everything just kind of turns around them. It's almost like, well, I mean, you can think of it like the British royal family, right? So you have the monarch, right? And they come and go, but then there's the firm, which stands behind the monarch, which is immovable, right? So this Hierophant, for me, the best example would be the firm, right? We'll call it that. And I just got like a little nervous in my stomach as I said that, but y'all know what I'm saying. Um, Maybe they're nervous, right? You should be firm if you're listening. Smash that like if you're listening, firm. But the Hierophant that's here, like I said, is typically immune to that cycle, right? They're kind of outside of the dance. But what I'm seeing right now is that, this energy is effectively coming for that old guard. So what that represents within our greater reality, I think, is the unnatural laws within this place that have allowed for things that would make us question our faith in general, right? Because how many times have we asked that question of, how could there possibly be a higher power if certain things are allowed here? But I think the reality is that it was technically never allowed, but it's like it's like a virus got into the system, right? It's like something kind of locked the truth out or something like that. Either which way, this thing that's represented by the Hierophant, the system, the laws, whatever, is being removed. And that's a good thing, but it comes with the reality that things go into a chaos phase for a moment. So this is the card on the bottom of the deck, the Five of Wands, right? Where it can be a chaotic energy because there's technically no leader within this group, right? So it's like if the leadership energy is removed from the equation, things do go into a bit of a chaos phase. I'm just going to use that word neutrally, right? It doesn't have to be anything traumatic. It's just, there's no one that's exactly there's no maestro that's kind of leading the orchestra, right? So the role that we're being called to play is showing up as the Page of Pentacles here. And what's really interesting to me is that when I first pulled this card, you can see that he has this necklace on him, right? And there's these two birds, and this one bird is pulling the necklace and creating some tension, and then he has this other bird in his hand back here. And I was seeing it as like a slingshot, right? That he was about to slingshot this bird towards the Hierophant, which reminds me of the last reading, the last collective, where I was saying that it's like there's a moment where things align perfectly and we know that that's the moment to act or the moment to strike. But the strike here, I think, is really just, it's again, it's the voice, it's language, it's affirmation. It's not really doing anything beyond declaring or affirming something. That it's like as soon as we realize, not even as soon as we realize, because I really do think that this thing has already been disempowered, right? But again, it's like the death card is sneaking up on it, right? So there's still, it's like, imagine if like the puppet master has been taken out of the equation, but somehow the puppets are still moving, right? Or it's like animatronic or something like that. That it's like, that's almost what we're seeing, right? Is that it's like, somehow the puppets are still moving, but like the people in the engineer room have already been let go, let's say. But again, there's this slingshot energy, this David and Goliath. So the Page of Pentacles is typically the card of the student, right? So it's somebody that has studied something very well. And I think all of us have studied different aspects of this experience very, very well. And we all have our expertise. We all have our personal guru that we can kind of step into. And when everything goes into a moment of flux, it's almost like that's the moment to kind of slingshot or project your personal affirmation onto whatever it is that's playing out around you, right? So this is micro and macro, but it's like, it again goes back to the last couple of readings that I've done where it's like, instead of focusing on where you're afraid the narrative might go, start steering the narrative towards where you want it to go, right? Because again, it's like there is nobody steering the narrative right now. I think that that's the reality of the situation. The puppets are still moving, but it's like nothing is actually, it's like, what would you say? Is automated the right word? I guess. It's kind of like yeah, it's just on autopilot. I guess that's the best way to say it, that it's like the narrative is just playing out on autopilot because there actually is no old guard or successor or anything like that. But in terms of like, let's use matrix theory as an analogy, right? So some sort of virus gets into the system that allows an imposter to start making rules on behalf of the rest of the collective. That thing gets removed, the system corrects itself, it scans everybody in the whole game, and it figures out who the actual rule makers are supposed to be. Welcome to all of the rule makers, right? But the rule makers don't know that they're the rule makers, right? So they're still asking permission, they're still kind of doing things differently, but it's like, it goes back to the idea of the Purple Heart that was coming up in a couple of readings, where it seemed like on the eclipse or right after the eclipse, it's like we got our proverbial Purple Heart, that thing that effectively acknowledges our service or something, if you want to say it like that, because the Purple Heart is something that you get if you're wounded in battle, but you stick with it and you fulfill the contract and you live, right? So we did all of those things, and now we've been like initiated. I guess that's the right way to say it, is like initiated, right? Because in order to be the Hierophant, you need to be ordained, right? So we've gone through the ordination process. Is that what you would call it? I don't know. But we've been voted in, I guess you could say, by, the construct itself, recognized, I think is the right way to say. So it's like, it's almost, I feel like it's saying like, use this slingshot at everything that you feel like you can use the slingshot at, in terms of whatever narrative you find yourself in, figure out where you want it to go and start scripting that, start visualizing that. Again, it's the Page of Pentacles, right? So you've been studying this for 1,001 years. You know everything about the law of attraction that you need to know. You know everything about scripting and manifesting and language magic that you need to know. You know everything about these systems that you need to know. You know everything about your own personal superpowers and gifts, right? We're like the X-Men, right? Everybody does something differently. Somebody here watching has the laser beam eyes. The other one is a girl that controls the weather, whatever. It's like we all have our thing and we know how to do it. And now it's saying it's going to be time to use it. But the other aspect of the Hierophant being taken out of the equation and then the void that needs to be filled is, this is a conversation I was just having with a friend of mine yesterday, where it's like, we've all kind of known that there's going to be that moment where we go from being the crazy friend to the friend that everybody's reaching out to because we're the only ones that they can talk to about whatever it is that's happening with them personally or collectively or whatever. And I'm sure a lot of you have already started getting those texts and calls and having those conversations because people know that you are the one and only friend that they have in their orbit that they can talk to. And that's honestly why I think so many of us have been spread out. I mean, thank the universe for the internet that's been able to connect us, but like, ultimately most of us are kind of isolated in terms of like, it's very rare that you find somebody in the 3D that you can have this type of conversation with. And I've been very blessed to have a few, but again, it's a few, and it's usually short-lived because it's like we wind up moving away from each other for different circumstances, and we just get like, these quick little debriefs, right? But James Bond works alone. It is what it is. It's like, that's what we're doing here. So, but we also have our own personal networks of, I guess, of the community around us, right? Of people that are going to be effectively asking us the questions or whatever. And so it's really kind of talking about getting comfortable and preparing yourself with that, right? And because it's going to be different, right? Because we're not going to be exactly leading a congregation or anything like that. I don't think any of us really have that desire. But just in terms of being the translator, right? Because that is the role of the Hierophant. He's the bridge between worlds, but he's also the translator, right? So he can help you make sense of things. Just like a lot of us, right? I'm sure a lot of you are very, very good at reading synchronicity and poetry and subliminal energy, and you have, emotional intelligence. You can read body language, you can read all of those things, right? So that's really the true gifts of the Hierophant. But then it's also really the ability to kind of bless with your language and heal with your language. And just the only example that I can really give in terms of like what I've done with my work is I've where do I even start with this? So I've had a lot of people come back to me after a reading has come true or whatever it is. And a lot of the readings, most of the readings I did were like career oriented readings where I got to read for a lot of influencers and magazine editors just because of the nature of the place that I was working for. And especially with like a lot of the magazine editors, right? They were all kind of living lives that a lot of people would envy, but they wound up getting pigeonholed into doing a particular type of writing that was not inspiring to them, or they would be forced to endorse products that didn't inspire them, right? And brands or whatever it was. And a lot of them wanted to make career pivots. And 9 times out of 10, I mean, I guess that's kind of irrelevant. The overall thing is that it's like the number one question that I get from people, which is a question they don't ask, I can just feel it, is tarot even real? Is there anything to this, right? So they won't ask me a question. They just want to see if I can pick up on something. The secondary question underneath that is God mad at me? That's always the second question that I can feel on these people. And the third is, do I have purpose, right? So it's like, again, nobody vocalizes these things, but it's like, I know when they tell me that they don't have a question, they just want a general, that's really what their question is. And so the reading usually says something like, tarot is real because you're getting all this weird information. And no, the universe has not given up on you. And in fact, it's so proud of you for actually hanging in there and putting up with the challenges and going through what you've gone through. And for most of them, it was saying whatever it is that you're doing next, there is no guru, there is no way shower that's really kind of done it, because you're going to be the trailblazer. Because a lot of them were trying to synthesize different aspects of themselves into one career, right? So they had interest in this, that, the third, whatever, and they wanted to figure out a way to turn that into something that not only brought their strengths and expertise to the table, but also their passion and their vision. So it was like the ultimate alignment kind of thing. And it was like, for so many of these people, I would get these kind of immediate responses like within a week, that it's like, oh my God, all these things happened and blah, 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 and everything you said. And honestly, it's like, I think the only thing that changed anything for these people was like that acknowledgement, it's going to make me choke up, that the universe had not given up on them. Just going to pause for 1 second.